Hey, Tasha.
Hey, Sarah.
And hello to everybody out there who's watching us today for this conversation with Tasha Douge. Tasha is a self-described Bronx-based, Haitian-descended, multidisciplinary artist and cultural vigilante. Her body of work intends to spark conversations about women's empowerment, Black community pride, and more. In her words, she considers her art a tool for serving, quote, as a bridge to connect and highlight those that may feel excluded or overlooked. Her provocative works disrupt, dismantle, and defamiliarize. They upend received wisdom and dominant narratives, but they also aim to inspire meaningful, if difficult, dialogue. And these are the conversations, she says, that will lead to meaningful change and reform. Tasha is well known for her work, This Land is Our Land, also known as Justice. It's a 3 by 5 foot flag made of synthetic hair, chicken wire, and cotton. She recently created a work that spotlights justice to be included in the current Art at Watson exhibition, Out of the Fray, which you can see on the Watson Institute website. Tasha, on behalf of Brown University's Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs, welcome. It's really a privilege to talk with you today, and I'm so grateful that you offered to give this artist talk.
Thank you. Happy to be here. And just for clarification, last name is Douge.
Douge, I should know that because I'm Francophone. Sorry about that.
No worries.
And also I wanted to note for anyone listening, watching on YouTube, if you have questions, please send them in and we will ask Tasha at the end. So I just mentioned this idea of conversations, and you have a email signature or tagline that's working on my legacy, one conversation at a time. So I wondered if you could explain what you mean by that. And I wonder also, is this conversation one of them?
Hey, everybody. First, I would like to let you know what I am wearing and how I look. So I am wearing, I don't know if this is cheetah or leopard, I'm unclear. I'm wearing a head wrap over my head. I have on a denim shirt, and I have on a bow tie made of Scrabble pieces that say the Bronx, because that is where I live and that's where I was raised. And I'm brown skinned. So as far as conversations, you know, the her is definitely in there because that was the impetus for my practice. I was working at a nonprofit organization in Harlem. I think it was about 3-4 years in, working in the women's department. And at that time, I was a STD tester and a counselor. And when I was engaging with my clients, I was just noticing from like the workshops that I was facilitating and the actual sessions that I was having that a lot of the people that came in, women identified, were like diminishing their own voices. And I was just like, when you're in the nonprofit sector, you know, you have deliverables to worry about. Some of my clients were rotating through the door, and I can start to see the onset of some type of behavioral change, but because of the structure, I couldn't really activate it in the way that I wanted to. And I was just like frustrated. So I had remembered a festival that I had gone to in 2008 at the time. So this was about 2014 when I was having these thoughts. And in 2008, I'd gone to a vagina festival. I remember the theater. It was the Sage Theater in Times Square. And I just remember walking into this space, and you know, there was like walls of vaginas, and there was poems about vaginas, and there was poems about women. And I just remember feeling seen in a particular type of way, and that how all types of differences were valued in that space. And so in that moment, juxtaposing the two, I wanted to bring that back. So inspired by that moment that I had for myself, I mean, there were still some absences. I wish that there were, you know, more representation of people of color, but I was like, I can do that. So I drafted up a proposal. I met with the executive team, at the nonprofit, and I was like, hey, y'all, I would love to do an art festival, art exhibition, not really knowing what I was cultivating at that moment. But they went for it, and they sure enough supported me, and I haven't stopped since. So I debuted this exhibition called Conversations in October 2015, and I haven't stopped since. And yes, this is one of those conversations.
I'm really glad to know that. Thank you. I wonder, over the past 5 years that you've been inspiring and engaging in these conversations, have you seen them result in change or reform, in all caps?
In all caps. I would say anytime I can get someone to think differently from whatever thoughts they had prior to engaging with me, I consider that success, right? You know, I find that art can plant the seed, and I don't have to see the ceiling break through the ground at that very moment, but knowing that that was planted and there could be other components that create an environment for that seed to grow, that is a part of my role as an artist. And I have seen in later, like when I go into other spaces and people say, I still remember your work, I still remember that piece, I'm like, oh, those are the healthy reminders and affirmations that I have done something to shift narratives, and that keeps me energized and revitalized. There was actually a piece that I have created called This is Blackface, where I don't know if you're familiar with oh man, what is it? Sleep No More mask? The Sleep No More mask. Well, have you ever seen the Mighty Ducks?
No.
Okay, so people who are out here who know these white, they look very menacing, and they have kind of like a beak or a mouth.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
So there's this place called Material for the Arts in New York. It's like a candy store for artists, right? Teachers take advantage of the materials there as well. But I had come across these masks, and they were just so menacing. I was like, oh my God, these are horrible looking up close. And it just evoked this emotion around the Black experience. And I was like, how then do I take these ugly, menacing masks and make them beautiful? And so I took the mask, I painted them Black. One is with chalkboard paint. The other one I embellished with semi-precious jewels. And the third one with different types of leather, right? Each one evoking a response from the audience to reflect on our experience, but from shifting from negative to positive, right? The diamond looking one actually represents coal. You know, like we think of coal being like sooty and just like dirty, but it's a fuel source. Mm-hmm. And Black people have been the fuel for many of things, especially on this land, right? Whether it be culture, labor, but you know, from coal comes a diamond, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. That from withstanding heat, pressure over time, you know, this gem, one of the strongest and one of the most coveted, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So wanting to shift how one who identifies as Black perceives themselves, mm-hmm. and with the leather mask, wanting people to consider themselves like, I'm thinking about armor. You know, like there were knights who were fighting to be affiliated with certain kingdoms and certain courts. And I'm just like, I wanted to remind people, like, your skin is armor. Armor that comes from a lineage of warriors, resistors, intellectuals, and that's something that's already embedded within our bodies, mm-hmm. that we should be proud of. Mm-hmm. So embracing all of those masks together, taking initially what may have been negative thoughts around being Black, wanting to like wipe that away like chalk, mm-hmm. And then saying like, this is what Blackface is. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that I've done with my work.
Well, I love this idea of planting seeds for the future, and you know, and also your ability to know that those seeds are taking root because people remember your work and recall mm-hmm. it to you. But I want to look backwards for a second, because I know you think and talk a lot about legacy, and that's also tied up with notions of ancestry, and specifically your Haitian forebears. So I've heard you talk about feeling the presence of your ancestors as you make art. And I wonder if you, I know it's a very intimate question, but I wonder if you could share what that experience is like and how they've informed your work.
So conversations that I've had with ancestors and spirit have always come at times when most needed, right? So for example, with justice, like you've described, 5 feet by 3 feet of hair that I hand braided, never considered myself a braider, right? But just resorting on what felt familiar from what I've experienced and what I've witnessed in hair shops. So that in itself is leaning on legacy. Like I didn't have to be taught, but I was absorbing that information and was able to translate that out. Mm-hmm. And when I think about the process of making justice, the lower 6 stripes are about 15 feet long, right? And the ones up top, vary in length. And I remember, interestingly enough, when she was almost complete, like literally, like I saw the finish line. It was right there. I just had to do a couple more stitching to the chicken wire. I just had to add the cotton balls. And I remember being on the floor in an apartment that I shared with my sister. I was exhausted. Like I had pricked my finger so many times. My back was contorted. She's 5 feet by 3 feet. I'm 5'3". So you can imagine how I had to contort my body. And it just put me in conversation on a very minimal scale on what my ancestors had to endure out in those cotton fields, right? When you hear stories about how they had to put like some type of protective jelly or something on their hands because they were being pricked so much as they picked the cotton, like I was getting senses of this from pricking my finger with this needle, needles, contorting my body. So I'm just imagining the weight of the bales of cotton and the bags that they had to literally drag in the fields under the hot sun. And even when I was burning the edges of the hair, right? So at times I'm smelling my own flesh burn, and I'm just thinking about ancestors being branded, and so sometimes the conversation isn't through words, it's from the actual physicality of the making that I find to be beyond, like every time I have these conversations and these moments, I don't conceive them beforehand. Like I'm always thinking about, okay, how am I gonna make this? But they find these moments of intimacy to charge me. And like I said, I just remember sitting there and I was done. I was just like, I can't believe that they had to endure this to a capacity that I can't even imagine. And I was like, I'm done. Like, this is a choice that I'm choosing to make this work. No one knows about this piece outside of myself and my sister. I'm good. And as clear as day, they were like, for us. Like literally I could hear voices in my ear say, for us. And I was like, wow. And it was more than just the words in my ear. There was this shock that went through my spine. And I knew that this was bigger than me. And I didn't have, and I was chosen, that sometimes I'd call her like my blessed burden, really. So there are those moments that, ancestors just show up, and they've only shown up when I really needed them.
And always around your art, or?
Around my art. And it's interesting because like my art is not just what I produce, my art is also my mouth, right? So I consider my voice to be the first tool in my arsenal when it comes to my practice. And there'll be times that I'll be in spaces and my left leg will start to shake and I'm like, oh, all right guys, they're like, speak up.
Amazing.
And always listening to that, so that has been that has been comforting and assuring. Even in moments when I'm scared, I feel held. If that makes sense.
A question that's related to some things that you just said is something you said to me when we first talked about your inclusion in Out of the Fray. You said something so interesting, and it was about the importance of process over product. You said process is something that can't be boxed. This ain't for you, folks. And you just invoked process again. Can you talk about what process is for you versus, I mean, because voice is ephemeral, right? So it's not like you're delivering something that can be framed and hung on a wall. That's not so much your art, although I suppose it could be. But I think the idea of the primacy of process over product as a way for you not to give something away almost is really interesting, unless I'm misinterpreting.
So for me, process is two things, right? So process over product for sure, because process for me is an integral part of the learning, right? Some people, they get to engage with the art in the tactile way or in close proximity, and there isn't any honoring of scholarship that goes into some of the things that artists are making, right? It's like, oh, you just put some paint on a canvas, all right? You just braided some hair and put it on some chicken wire. That took scholarship, right? And it was like there were things that I knew instinctually, intrinsically, and that were innate to my cells that that have been compartmentalized, but I knew, and there were things that I had to research, in order to ground the work in something historical, right? And that's a part of the process. And there have been pieces that I've started 2 years ago and I've had to leave because I couldn't finish, or for whatever reason that time for completion wasn't there yet. There were still things I had to brew within myself before I can complete the work. But then also on top of that, process is actual product, right? That is the thing. I tell people, even if I were to have not completed justice, what I went through was a thing. It was the thing that allowed me to carry her in a particular way where she can now resonate with people in my space and outside of my space. Because that relationship was built with the work in a way that we complement each other, but we also stand alone, right? So process can supersede product, and it in itself is, and I don't even want to use the word product because, sorry, that's a capitalism, but it is something, it is an essence that should be valued and not overlooked when it comes to the process of making.
I'm so glad you brought up scholarship, because I think of you as very, very, very brainy and very research-based. No, I do. And I mean, your work has an incredible physicality, obviously. It's very embodied, but it's also highly intellectual and very informed. And so just jumping from justice to the video that you created for this show, Road to Brown, you dove into the archives of Brown's Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice. And I wanted to ask you, and that struck me as so, like you say, scholarly. And I wonder, is your approach always so scholarly and research-based? Is it ever just spontaneous or visceral?
So I would say, I feel like my practice is a healthy balance of both, right? As a conceptual mixed media artist, sometimes I see things and I have no idea what I'm going to use it for. Not a clue. It will sit in my apartment for years. And my sister will be like, why do you have this? You're a hoarder. get rid of it. And I'm like, nope, I don't think so. It's important for something.
Mm-hmm.
And time again, that has been proven to be true, right? With Justice, when I initially made her, and I shared my idea with my sister in the car, she simply told me, like, you're gonna need something to like hold the braids together. The irony in that is that I had chicken wire in my storage that was supposed to be for another piece that didn't work out. And I was like, when am I gonna use chicken wire? And I was like, I'll just chuck it. And immediately there was a response, no words, but just an internal response that said no. And when the time came a year later to make Justice, when I unraveled the chicken wire, it was exactly 3 feet by 5 feet. So that to me was divine, like she knew she was coming before I knew, and so as an artist, it was confirmation for me that I am a vessel, I'm a conduit for messages. That is a privilege, truly. And when I think about that process for the piece, The Road to Brown, I think about, when we first started talking, you and I and Judith, there was no idea, there was an ask, can you make another Justice? And I was like, absolutely not. That's sacrilegious. And for curators or anyone out there listening, don't ask an artist to make the work again. Okay? Because there is an intimacy, and, it may not be malicious, but it does. Yeah, let's not.
It discounts process.
There you go. But in our conversations, because it's a rare thing for me, you got to see what that conceptual, how my ideas formulate, how it went from maybe using my collage process, using the archives to do that. But when I continue to bring thoughts through my mind over and over again, then I have epiphanies, right? And we're talking about out of the fray. And I had just acknowledged, Justice being 4 years old. She is currently frayed. And she's frayed because of the spaces that I've taken her to, whether it be in galleries or museums, but she's been out in the streets, right? She has rubbed against bodies that look like hers. And so her current aesthetic speaks to a narrative that beautifully melded well with the description of the exhibition. So like having that epiphany and then using text to play with, I love using puns, Road to Brown. I will credit Judith, that, and in that moment, she heard me. Like when I can be in spaces and people really grapple with what I'm offering, for her to offer the road as in Rhode Island, I was like, okay, you hear me.
And just for our listeners, Tasha is referencing the phenomenal curator Judith Tolnick-Champa, who created the show Out of the Fray and first invited Tasha Douge to be part of it. And I encourage everyone to find it on our website, watson.brown.edu, and take a look at all the works, but especially Tasha's. And this idea of fraying, I wanted to stay with. In the video that you created, the voice of Justice, I don't know if I should say Justice or you, or the voice of Justice, I think, addresses John Brown, for whom Brown University was named eventually, and his brothers, who profited enormously from the North American slave trade. And Justice says, slavery has robbed us both. And I wonder, and it's in that part where she's talking about, fraying and friction and rubbing up against each other. And I wonder if you could say more about how slavery, what she meant by that line.
So in that moment, the clear response would be directed towards those who were enslaved, right? The robbing of their humanity. for well over 400 years on this land and over 200 years in Rhode Island, which is mind-boggling, right? But this idea of it also robs the oppressor, right? Like you're constantly in a monster state. You know what I mean? And you have to maintain that monster state in order to keep those oppressed, right? So prior to doing this work, I remember having a conversation with some friends of mine. I was like, I feel bad for white people, right? Because I'm thinking, and I positioned myself in the body of a white child, right? Growing up at a time of slavery, being nursed by a Black woman, right? Being cared for by a Black woman, hanging out with some of the other Black children, you know what I mean? Maybe not as often, maybe not too often, but having some engagement at some point and loving this person that's caring for them, right? And then one day, all of a sudden, your white mother says, you know what, you can't hang out with them anymore. Now you have to be the one to inflict, whether it be physical or psychological harm on that body.
Mm-hmm.
That is mental warfare.
Mm-hmm.
Like my angst and my frustration towards the oppressor is very clear. But when I'm thinking about white people, I'm thinking about what that does for your brain. Like the one person that was someone who was taking care of me, who may have nursed me, like breast milk flowing through my body at some point, is now an enemy. So like I'm always thinking about psychologically, what does that do to one's body?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that get transported through the genes and DNA in the same way that our traumas get the same way our bodies carry the DNA of our ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it robs both people.
Mm-hmm.
But the unfortunate part of that conversation is that the oppressor doesn't see that.
Yeah.
In the mass, as a mass.
Yeah, there are studies proving that it does great psychic harm to be an oppressor, whether that's a commanding officer in a prison or other settings. But that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it in terms of John Brown until.
Yeah. And I actually found out that during the research that the school was actually named after Nicholas Jr. in 1804, which I mentioned in the piece as well. So it was interesting that the school will then be named after one of the nephew, right? Yes, the nephew, who would then become an abolitionist along with his uncle Moses.
But
And
Moses
it's complicated. Let's oh Lord,
very complicated family.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just talk about, I just want to ask you questions about justice for a moment.
Sure.
So many. Why a flag? Why braids? When did she go, you originally named this piece, This Land is Our Land. When did she become a she? When did she become this gendered presence that may or may not be your avatar? But just from the beginning, where did you come up with braids and cotton and a flag?
So backstory for Justice Inception. Presidential election time, 45 has his campaigns rolling thick. And I remember I was in my sister's car, White Plains Road, Northern Bronx, and I just heard the phrase, "Make America Great," the last time. Like literally I heard it snap. And it was just a barrage of questions: who, what, when, where, how, why, all of those things. And what it came down to for me was you're in the position that you're in right now because of the system that was slavery, right? And I was like, yo, America's wealth is indebted to slavery, right? And I was like, well, how do I depict that? And when I think of the American flag, I just think of capitalism. This monster. Some people argue that capitalism doesn't have to be a monster. I don't know that version of capitalism. I don't know the version of capitalism that doesn't eat at humanity. So I will continue to refer to it as a monster. So I'm looking at the flag and I'm like, oh, that's it. This is the ultimate symbol of capitalism, but how do I make her black? How do I make the flag black? At that point, I wasn't thinking about gender. And hair just seemed like Black hair is so political. Black hair is also quite defiant, right? And it's also quite recognizable. Like, I didn't want there to be any ambiguity around what I was saying in the work. So I was like, okay, let me just get this hair. And, you know, we are aware of the other products that were used during, or, you know, or sold and collected during the slave trade, you know, spices, sugar, rum. And I am curious about other products to incorporate in my practice. However, you know, especially here, you know, cotton was deemed king cotton for a reason, at one point becoming the largest export. And I was like, oh, let's get rid of these stars and then just plug it in with some cotton, because I felt like that told a very clear narrative around what was happening in this space. And initially, when I called the piece, "This Land is Our Land," it was, the word "our" was capitalized, and that was intentional to question who is the "our," right? Is it the master's land, the conqueror's land, because they've acquired it, even if it's through violence? Is it the land of the laborers, the people who are toiling the land, even if they're under the control of someone else? Is it, and now that I'm thinking about it too, you know, is it, where are the indigenous people in that conversation? Because initially, when I first thought of the piece, and people might not know this, is that I wanted to incorporate eagle feathers because of the relationship with indigenous people. Interestingly enough, you cannot use real eagle feathers because of a federal mandate. I was like, wow, that's powerful. But then I had to revisit what I was talking about. And if I'm talking about the system of slavery on this land that was dominated by Africans who were enslaved and brought here to land. So I had to like hone back in on what my initial thought was. And then the question was like, well, can it be our land? Like, everybody having access to the land, living in this utopia, right? And the question still remains unanswered. And when she shifted, I can't remember the point when she was a she, but she was very clear she was a she. And I know that, you know, the gender conversation is very sensitive, right? So when I was thinking she, I was thinking about those who embody and hold onto the Black womb, right? Because the Black womb is what creates worlds, right? We are descendants of, at the time of, we don't even know if Lucy was queer. Who knows? I don't know. Haven't got a chance to talk to Lucy, but we do know for damn sure that Lucy was Black, right? Yeah. And so whomever Lucy gave birth to, we are descendants of her. And that for me speaks to Alpha and Omega, beginning and end. And I'm not sorry for that. I'm not sorry for that. When you think of conversations and situations, you think about civil rights movements, you think about all of these Black women, even in feminism, Black women were drivers in the feminist movement, but yet somehow, you know, get overlooked,
And
and that idea gets usurped, right? So she changed from this title, this name, to Justice when I was doing a photo shoot with a husband and wife duo, Jess and Oliver from Philadelphia. You know, I just needed some photos. You know, we're just taking some pics, you know, did a little barter system. And that ended up being a day that we have dubbed Sunday Magic. And we were in Philly, and we were right in the area by the Liberty Bell. And, you know, we were taking all these photos, and I noticed that there was a wall. And that was where there's a structure where George Washington's home used to be, right? And on this wall, there were 8 names. And they were explaining to us that that was the 8 names of his enslaved Africans. And before I even knew that, there was an immediate halt. Like, we were walking past, and it was like, I was like, hey, y'all, we got to take a picture there. And we're taking this picture, and in the photograph, and it's on my Instagram, I'll probably repost it after tonight. I literally had to prop myself on my hands and knees, right? And then, you know, they positioned her over me. And at this point, we were already calling her Justice, but we know it was like that day. And I remember we took the shots. We're like, hey, we took the shots, and we got into the car, and one of the other artists with us, Star, she goes, you know, you were literally on your hands and feet for justice. And the most eerie silence took over the car, and I just started hysterical crying. Because for us to be in that space in the 21st century, where our ancestors were enslaved, and still have to have this conversation, still have to endure this plight, it does something visceral to your body. And that was such a tender and rich communal moment for us. It was a spiritual moment for us, and I could speak for myself specifically. It was all encompassing of things that I don't even have words for.
That's why you're an artist. I was speaking to Trisha Rose, who directs Brown's Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity in America, not too long ago. And I should back up. You know, the Watson Institute is all about social science, right? And her center is also a very scholarly, research-based center. And I was asking her about the inclusion of so many artists. It's like this a very welcoming place for artists. And she said, and I'm quoting her, artists have always been the most powerful of voices for helping us see things around us in ways that are often invisible to those of us who don't have that gift. And there's much capacity to get at the heart of something in a way that engages your spirit and soul as well as your intellect. To me, the artists are critical, and they help us connect in ways that words don't. And I wonder what you think about that, but it seems like you sort of just said that in your own way.
I think Trisha is smart, right? Just think she gets it. Clear. I find myself humbled almost every time I complete a piece, because it is magic. Art is magic, right? And you know, I tell people all the time, like, art is life, life is art. You know, from the bed frame that we sleep on, that person that made it, that conceptualized that, is an artist. They are creative. They may not deem themselves as such, but they are, right? Someone who's a florist making these arrangements to evoke and create a particular aura. You are an artist. You are a creative. And so to tap into that power in a way that uplifts an intention for a greater good is something that people who identify as artists, for the most part, because there are some artists there, listen, what I've found in this journey of mine since October 2015 is that some people have come into this sector for reasons outside of those that I've come into it for, right? Came into art for community. I'm still learning the business part of it because there is a business element. And so someone was asking me at a panel that I was moderating, well, how do you discern between who takes your art and who doesn't? And like, these are all questions for the artists to answer for themselves, right? I was very clear when justice was made. At this point, in this moment right now, she is not for sale because that replicates the system that I'm trying to assault, attack, dismantle, right? And I can't participate in that way. Now, if she tells me tomorrow, sell me to the right person, and please believe there will be an extreme vetting process because she can't be everywhere either. She can't be over someone's fireplace, right? And so that also brings up with the art, like some people sell their artwork and some people sell their souls. And the latter is not a negotiable for me, right? So with that, you know, my art has been telling me those things and showing me those things. And that's why I feel like artists who really are grounded in this work speak a language that speaks to the heartstrings, that speak to the soul that we have been disconnected from. Like when you can walk past a piece of work, or not even piece of work, because it's sometimes that's reductive. When I say artwork, it feels reductive for some pieces. Like I literally just went to a show a couple of days ago, Jonathan Payne. Jonathan, if you're here, hello. I saw his artwork and I literally was like, thank you for showing me what liberated DNA looks like. You have given me hope for what a helix looks like unstressed. He was like, say what now? That's what certain art can do for you. You know, when I'm looking at some of his sketches, I was just like, this is what love looks like on paper. And so Patricia got it right. Like artists can do things, artists can contort and transmute in a way that's going to take us to the next day, to the next moment. And so if art dies, pack it up, people. Get you a coffin. That's it. You might as well just, it's a done deal.
Can agree with you. I think you just answered my next question. Was justice the moment you became, was making justice the moment you became an artist, or that you knew you were an artist?
No. I would say when I did my first exhibition, what I will say with justice, and other artists might find this to be true, is that sometimes a particular piece is so profound and resonates with people so much that it then overshadows your other practice. Did I lose you, Sarah?
No, I'm right here. I'm just moving.
Oh, okay.
Didn't want to interrupt.
No. And so what has happened is that justice, and I'm not mad, I'm trying to find a way to balance this, I have become known for justice. But there are other pieces that I've created that are just as profound. My first exhibition, Conversations, I created a piece, and the thing that I love about being conceptual artist, I was like, I'm not interested in perfectionism. That's not. I'm interested in storytelling, and I am interested in shifting. And any ways that I can do that is what I will do. So in that show, I created I had like 7 pieces, but that was nuts. I created a piece called Check Hers, where I made a life-size checkerboard that participants actually, people who came to the show actually played. And what looked like a benign checkerboard game, once you actually started playing the pieces, it would uncover some of the things that women were fighting each other over. Bags, hair, nails, money, men, and wanting to actually use the action of taking one out, taking pieces out. I was like, why are we taking each other out over materialist things, right? And this idea of having to be queened, this unification of two pieces, that being a defining moment where you can navigate the board in a completely different way, was what I wanted to uplift. Now, once you're a queen, you still take people out, but wanting to like find ways to bring that to the forefront, that it felt palpable. Another piece that I had was called Invisible, where I took white viewfinders, like the old school viewfinders. I love using pieces that are nostalgic as well. My attempt was to create moments of empathy. So it's, imagine a cubby, 9 cubbies together, and there are 9 white viewfinders in each cubby. None of them are marked. And I just remember people were just like, can we touch this? Yes, I want you to engage with the art. And when you picked up one of the viewfinders, there was 3 subject matters that you could find yourself along. I will talk about one of them, not all 3, in the event that someone does see the work that's watching. You pick up the viewfinder and it's like, oh, this is so benign, it's a nice little toy, this is so great. But then when you come in, it hits you with some hardcore subject matter. And what I wanted to do is illustrate that when you engage with people, one, you don't know when you're entering in their life, at what point you're entering in their life, right?
True.
How much are you being a voyeur? Like what is your level of engagement with that person? How are you exiting that person's life? And how is empathy being activated in that moment? So like ever since I started, I have not reset the viewfinders to show that I don't know where you're gonna pick it up. Because what I find is like particularly on certain subject matters, you find people clicking a little bit longer. And now, is that curiosity? Is that care? Is that criticism? There are all of these things that happen, but what I love about it, aesthetically, it looks benign, right? So taking something that's youthful, nostalgic, and it's like, yay, to really activate conversations and also with intimacy. Because when I look at a painting, if we go to an exhibition together, we're looking at the same painting or the same sculpture, I'm being, my thoughts and your thoughts are melding together. And sometimes that's a good thing around sparking conversation. But what does it mean to engage with art, you yourself, your own thoughts without interruption or any type of distraction? And that's what I found to be one of the most beautiful moments, because no one knows what you're looking at that particular point. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so like, these are some of the pieces that most people don't know about, and some people that follow my work are aware of. So it's like, I'm trying to balance, how do I bring those pieces back out so that they can see the vast nature of all the many topics that I've had. Because there was another one that I did, that same show, called Period Pony, where I wanted to address this duality that people have to endure for those of us that menstruate. You know, one minute you can be bringers of life and you are adored for that, and in the same notion, either you're being sent to huts in places in Africa where you are ostracized. You know what I'm saying? You're thinking about in certain religious traditions, when you're menstruating, you know, you got to be around some sheets. There's this separation that happens. And I'm like, this is nuts. That's crazy. That's guaranteed. Once a month, you are going to be ostracized for a couple of days. And even thinking about it within the shelter system here, I read an article in the Huffington Post years back, and that was actually one of the charges for this piece, you know, women were saying, people at that point were identifying as women were saying, like, you know, they were only allotted few sanitary napkins. And when asking for more, they were like, no, you can't. So they expressed this dehumanizing thing that was happening to them already in a difficult situation. Mm-hmm. So it was just like, really? That's what we're doing? So I was, again, with the scholarship, I looked up, like, what are some torture tactics? And, you know, I could thank the good old medieval times. Listen, European folk. Oh, sorry. Y'all were jacked up, okay? There was this torture tactic called the Spanish donkey, where you literally were on this, like, three-dimensional triangle where they added weights to your feet and you were bound from behind and you were literally split. So I created my own version of a Spanish donkey with a large menstruation pad, a black mannequin riding the menstruation pad, bread plates smeared everywhere, tampons and pads and lights, loads, whatever, all on the floor, and this one singular red tear coming down the black mannequin's face to speak to this duality that menstruating bodies have to deal with when it comes to their existence.
Well, I invite everybody to look you up on Instagram, because there are other works that works and moments that can be appreciated on your account. Like the Broken Hands of Time, which we unfortunately don't have time for. And
right.
I don't know if we have any questions from viewers.
Oh yeah.
But if we don't, I did want to just ask you one last question, and that's about this moment that we're living in. I just wondered if, you know, either by restricting our movements, masking our faces, the virus afflicting Black people so disproportionately, has the pandemic changed your process or your practice? Has it hindered you? Has it inspired you?
So this pandemic has actually affirmed me in my process, because I don't make work at this moment that's mass produced. I've always been like, F your expectations, I'm gonna make work how I make my work. You know, I usually tell people, what's your deadline? It'll get done. You know what I mean? Because I feel like when I apply too many deadlines to my practice, it then impedes my work, right? So give me your final deadline, and then give me the deadline that we could probably push a little bit past, maybe about a day or two, but then it will get done. So like what I have proven time and time again is that I am someone that is able to commit to an offering and it be, if not what I offered, or more than what I offered. And that feels good. Like I feel good in the conversations that I'm having. I feel good in how I've been advocating for myself even more so. And I'm gonna continue. Like this is only strengthening how I've been moving and also giving me lessons in order to take it to the next level. So it's scary, but it's scary because of what's happening around me. But I feel like as artists, you know, we are able to do things that most people cannot. So
even if it takes a toll.
For artists that are out there, I do encourage that we take our moments. Like I took my moments. You know, this video that I made for this show, I know we got like 5 minutes left. I've never done my own video. I've never video edited ever in my life. And I promise you, when I was editing, the system went down. And I could have had a meltdown. And I was like, no, I will not. I'm going to sleep. because I knew that resting over panicking was going to ensure that I was at my best in order to give the work that I was trying to offer.
Mm-hmm. That is great advice for artists. Tasha,
Mm-hmm.
it's been such a pleasure to get to know you, to get to know your work, and to talk with you tonight. So you're just so generous with your thoughts, and I really want to thank you. And we will continue to follow you, and I hope you will stay in touch. And I hope that everyone out there learned a lot and will look up Tasha's work on our website, watson.brown.edu. Any final words, Tasha?
I was just saying thank you to everybody. I would just say hug an artist, honor an artist, pay an artist. And that's it. Because we are truly, truly offering our whole selves in order for this life to be worth it.